But I wanted to say it before I forgot it, because the connection seemed to me so profound and important. But on evil, I said last time, giving you the Augustinian notion of evil, that we would trace evil as it occurs in the story and how he portrays this. But one of the ways in which it is presented is, I said already, through the way in which shadows are portrayed in the story. Just blank that. I did. Shadows are regularly portrayed in relation to Mordor, and which evil is portrayed as that. And the creature that really evidences this, now we could see it in various ways, and I'm wondering if I can find this now. I mean, I've already referenced the sort of beginning jingle: 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. At the moment, the darkness is not fully comprehending even Mordor. It's just a shadow. But when it binds everything, it will do what I said evil does, which it will be a parasite on the good, and it will pull them all into darkness. So it is a wholly negative force. Sauron thinks that he gains power by bringing everything under his domination. What he brings about is the annihilation of everything, because his will is bent on evil. He's a demonic sort of figure. It's hard not to see him in those terms even. And the ring wraiths, again, the word wraith is like wreath. It's like a smoke. It's a twisted shadowy type of essence. That's exactly how the 9 riders are portrayed, and it is how the Balrog is also portrayed. So let me see if I can find the Balrog. Where is the Balrog? It's at the end of the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. I should probably play clips from the movie here. It's got the great, cool movie. Cool music, rather. Swords are, do as I say, Gandalf said fiercely, swords are no more use here. Go. Why would swords be no more use? It's not a physical enemy. Right? Frodo thought he could hear the voice of Gandalf above, muttering words that ran down the sloping roof with a sighing echo. He could not catch what was said. The walls seemed to be trembling. Every now and again the drum beats throbbed and rolled. Doom, doom. And it's doom, doom, or doom, boom. Gandalf suddenly came flying down the steps and fell to the ground in the midst of the company. Well, well, that's over, said the wizard, struggling to his feet. I have done all that I could do, but I have met my match and have nearly been destroyed. But don't stand here, go on. You will have to do without light for a while. I am rather shaken. Go on, where are you, Gimli? Come ahead with me, keep close behind all of you. Down they go. What did you meet? I don't know, answered Gandalf, but I found myself suddenly faced by something that I have not met before. I could think of nothing to do but to try and put a shutting spell on the door. I know many, but to do things of that kind requires time, and even then the door can be broken by strength. As I stood there, I could hear orc voices on the other side. At any moment I thought they would burst it open. I could not hear what was said. They seemed to be talking in their own hideous language. All I caught was gash, that is, fire. Then something came into the chamber. I felt it through the door, and the orcs themselves were afraid and fell silent. It laid hold of the iron ring, and then it perceived me and my spell. What it was, I cannot guess, but I have never felt such a challenge. The counterspell was terrible. It nearly broke me. For an instant the door left my control and began to open. I had to speak a word of command. That proved too great a strain. The door burst in pieces. Something dark as a cloud was blocking out all the light inside, and I was thrown backwards down the stairs. All the wall gave way and the roof of the chamber as well, I think. So there's a darkness there. He can't, and there's no light through it. It's just darkness that he sees. And I'll read on a bit. They now went on again. Before long, Gimli spoke. He had keen eyes in the dark. I think he said that there is a light ahead, but it is not daylight. It is red. What can it be? Gosh, muttered Gandalf. Fire. I wonder if that is what they meant, that the lower levels are on fire. Still, we can only go on. Soon the light became unmistakable and could be seen by all. It was flickering and glowing on the walls. Down the passage before them, they could now see their way. In front, the rope sloped down swiftly, and some way ahead there was a low archway. Through it, the growing light came. The air became very hot. And they get through to the other side. And they hear doom, doom. And what it was could not be seen. It was like a great shadow, in the middle of which was a dark form, of man shape maybe, yet greater. And a power and terror seemed to be in it and to go through before it. It came to the edge of the fire, and the light faded as if a cloud had bent over it. Then with a rush it leapt across the fissure. The flames roared up to greet it and wreathed about it, and a black smoke swirled in the air. Its streaming mane kindled and blazed behind it. In its right hand was a blade like a stabbing tongue of fire. In its left it held a whip of many thongs. Aye, aye, wailed Legolas, a Balrog has come. Gimli stared with wide eyes. Durin's bane, he cried, and letting his axe fall, he covered his face. A Balrog, muttered Gandalf. Now I understand. He faltered and leant heavily on his staff. What an evil fortune, and I am already weary. The dark figure, streaming with fire, raced towards them. The orcs yelled and poured over the stone gangways. Then Boromir raised his horn and blew. Loudly the challenge rang and belled like the shout of many throats over the cavernous roof. For a moment the orcs quailed, and the fiery shadow halted. Note the response to the sound. They actually retreat. They hold back for a second. For a moment, when the echoes died, as suddenly as a flame blown out by a dark wind, and the enemy advanced again. Over the ridge, fly! This is a foe beyond any of you. I must hold the narrow way. Fly! The Balrog reached the bridge. Gandalf stood in the middle of the span, leaning on the staff in his left hand, but in the other Glamdring gleamed, cold and white. His enemy halted again, facing him, and the shadow about it reached out like two vast wings. It raised the whip, and the thongs whined and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, but Gandalf stood firm. You cannot pass, he said. The orcs stood still, and a dead silence fell. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Uden. Go back to the shadow, you cannot pass. The Balrog made no answer. The fire in it seemed to die, but the darkness grew. It stepped forward slowly onto the bridge, and suddenly it drew itself up to a great height, and its wings were spread from wall to wall, but still Gandalf could be seen. Glimmering in the gloom, he seemed small and altogether alone, gray and bent like a wizened tree before the onset of a storm. From out of the shadow a red sword leapt, flaming, Glamdring glittered white in answer. There was a ringing clash and a stab of white fire. The Balrog fell back, and its sword flew up in molten fragments. The wizard swayed on the bridge, stepped back a pace, and then again stood still. You cannot pass, he said. With a bound, the Balrog leapt full upon the bridge. Its whip whirled and hissed. He cannot stand alone, cried Aragorn suddenly, and ran back across the bridge. Elendil, he cried, I am with you, Gandalf. Gondor, cried Boromir, and leapt after him. At that moment Gandalf lifted his staff, and crying aloud he smote the bridge before him. The staff broke asunder and fell from his hand. A blinding sheet of white flames sprang up. The bridge cracked. Right at the Balrog's feet it broke, and the stone upon which it stood crashed into the gulf, while the rest remained poised, quivering like a tongue of rock thrust out into its emptiness. With a terrible cry the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. But even as it fell, it swung its whip, and the thongs lashed and curled about the wizard's knees, dragging him to the brink. Anyway, the portrait there of light and darkness, and the light conquering the darkness, but the darkness pulling it down. And that encounter is entirely in the language of darkness and shadow. You see this very clearly portrayed, although when I say clearly, it's very obscurely portrayed. You don't get the sense of a physical encounter. There's a bit, but it's with the swords. The swords hit, the swords are visible, they're light. When that is shattered, all that's left is the light and the darkness, and there isn't a sense of a physical encounter. It's the same thing when the armies meet on Pelennor Fields. It's a sort of it's more of a spiritual fight than a physical fight. And he doesn't want to be accused of Gnosticism here, but he does want to portray good against evil, and that's why he uses this language of shadow and lack of substance and a privation of the good. And it comes out of Mordor, which again represents evil, but the evil is really the evil of, it's like a parasite that's threatening to swallow up the whole world. And Melkor's deputy, who's now the Lord of the Rings, Sauron, is trying to bring everyone down with him, just like Satan does in Paradise Lost. He can't do any good. He can't hope to conquer, because he only lives to negate what's good. But by doing that, he brings about his own downfall. There's that sense, and what motivates the evil forces is fear, which Gandalf says is the enemy's chief weapon. Note that this is done repeatedly. The cries of the Balrog, the cries of the riders, the cries of the, what do they call them when they're flying through the air? What's the word that they use? Nazgul. It's the cry that quails the men, the creatures, and that breaks their courage. It's an attack on character, first of all. And it's the task of the leaders to not be afraid, to stand, to hold the line. They're not there to defeat the enemy, they're there to stand and stand with the, you could talk about Ephesians 6 here, with the armor of God on. And the armor of God then here would be their courage intact, with a sense of faithfulness, with a sense of righteousness. Because their enemy isn't flesh and blood, it is evil in this sense. Tolkien's pretty consistent in this. And that even extends to the point of the most influential passage in relation to this. Do you want me to talk about another passage, by the way? I'm going to come to Mount Doom now and see where I go after that. Depends on how much time I have left. Mount Doom 9:33. In this. Note that the sound of the drum beat was doom, doom. And this is Mount Doom, and doom has the obvious sense of doom. In case you didn't figure it out. Not a lot of subtlety here. You'll note that one of the great gifts that's given to Frodo is the phial of Galadriel, the light of the star when all other lights have gone out, this light. Sam uses it at the end here in Mount Doom. I'll come back to that, the implements they're given and their connection with the virtues which they are in evidence of as well. But this is Mount Doom, and I'll pick it up in the middle of that passage. Where is it? It is book, for those of you who don't have it, it is book 6, chapter 3, Mount Doom. The path climbed on, soon it bent again with a last eastward course, passed in a cutting along the face of the cone, and came to the dark door in the mountainside, the door of the Samath Naur. Far away now, rising towards the south, the sun, piercing the smokes and haze, burned ominous, a dull, bleared disk of red. But all Mordor lay about the mountain like a dead land, silent, shadow-folded, waiting for some dreadful stroke. So there's the light of the sun. And again, with the darkness, I mean, it's like almost the encounter between Gandalf and the Balrog again. Sam came to the gaping mouth and peered in. It was dark and hot, and a deep rumbling shook the air. "Frodo! Master!" he called. There was no answer. For a moment he stood, his heart beating with wild fears, and then he plunged in. A shadow followed him. Who's the shadow? Gollum. But he's not called Gollum here. A shadow followed him. I mean, it's telling language. Once you start seeing it, you start seeing it all over the place. Very artfully done. Of course, he sees it only as a shadow, but the shadow. Now, remember the thing that had been said to Gollum: if you betray them, the ring will hold you to your word, and it will end badly for you. So even here, the power of language is greater than the power of betrayal. So there's the primacy of the word even in this encounter, and Tolkien's quite clear on the importance of oaths being given, not just coerced. A coerced word doesn't mean much. You have to do it, but one that is given freely as a confession, you will be held by that. At first he could see nothing. In his great need he drew out once more the phial of Galadriel, but it was pale and cold in his trembling hand, and threw no light into that stifling dark. He was come to the heart of the realm of Sauron and the forges of his ancient might, greatest in Middle-earth. All other powers were here subdued. Fearfully he took a few uncertain steps in the dark, and then all at once there came a flash of red that leapt upward and smote the high black roof. Then Sam saw that he was in a long cave or tunnel that bored into the mountain's smoking cone. But only a short way ahead, its floor and the walls on either side were cloven by a great fissure, out of which the red glare came, now leaping up, now dying down, into darkness, and all the while far below there was a rumour and a trouble, as of great engines throbbing and labouring. The light sprang up again, and there, on the brink of the chasm, at the very crack of doom, stood Frodo, black against the glare, tense, erect, but still as if he'd been turned to stone. "Master!" cried Sam. Then Frodo stirred and spoke with a clear voice, indeed with a voice clearer and more powerful than Sam had ever heard him use. And it rose above the throb and turmoil of Mount Doom, ringing in the roof and walls. "I have come," he said, "but I do not choose now to do what I came to do. I will not do this deed. The ring is mine." And suddenly, as he set it on his finger, he vanished from Sam's sight. Sam gasped, but he had no chance to cry out, for at that moment many things happened. Something struck Sam violently in the back. His legs were knocked from under him, and he was flung aside, striking his head against the stony floor. As a dark shape sprang over him, he lay still, and for a moment all went black. And far away, as Frodo put on the ring and claimed it for his own, even in Samath Naur, the very heart of his realm, the power in Barad-dûr was shaken, and the tower trembled from its foundations to its proud and bitter crown. The Dark Lord was suddenly aware of him, and his eye piercing all shadows, looked across the plain to the door that he had made, and the magnitude of his own folly was revealed to him in a blinding flash, and all the devices of his enemies were at last laid bare. Then his wrath blazed in consuming flame, but his fear rose like a vast black smoke to choke him, for he knew his deadly peril and the thread upon which his doom now hung. For all his policies and webs of fear and treachery, from all his stratagems and wars, his mind shook free, and throughout his realm a tremor ran. His slaves quailed, and his armies halted, and his captains, suddenly steerless, bereft of will, wavered and despaired, for they were forgotten. The whole mind and purpose of the power that wielded them was now bent with overwhelming force upon the mountain. At his summons, wheeling with a rending cry in a last desperate race, there flew, faster than the winds, the Nazgul, the ring-wraiths, and with a storm of wings they hurtled southwards to Mount Doom. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this in 2 seconds. But notice that Frodo says these words, I have come, but I do not choose now what I came to do. I will not do this deed. The ring is mine. He renounces his own will, and in so fails in the quest at this point. His task is to destroy the ring. And he's borne it, again, like a priest, as a propitiation to destroy evil. He's borne it thus far on the Via Dolorosa, his path of suffering. He's got to the point where there's no strength in him. It talks about the power of the ring. So here's, I should say this about the ring of power. It grows upon him with such strength that he can't take another step. It's gone so heavy, he says. The ring is so heavy that he can't move another step. And it seems to contradict what I said last time about evil being a non-thing, because now it's got weight. But then Tolkien contradicts that by having Samwise pick him up. And he finds that he is as light as a feather. Can't believe it. And says, I might not be able to carry the ring, but I can carry you. Well, how can he carry him? Because Frodo had been eating and Sam hadn't. And he's not that much stronger, if at all. But it's because of the power of the ring. The power of the ring has subdued his will to him, and that's why he has no strength. His will is gone. He can't take it any further, but it actually doesn't weigh any more than it ever did. There isn't a change in the properties of the ring. It's the effect of the ring on Frodo. His will has been totally consumed with it. He can't see anything else. He just sees the eye of Sauron. And sees him, he's like he's on a rack. He can't do it. He fails in his quest. And in the end, he takes the ring of power as his own, meaning to be the Lord of the Rings himself. Puts it on. And says, the ring is mine. And then he puts the ring on and, of course, vanishes. The privation, which we've seen, has affected him to the point where his ring finger is now translucent. We saw that back in the realm of the elves in, what's it called now? Where Elrond is in Rivendell. Thank you. In Rivendell, a faint translucence on his finger, which had extended Bilbo's life, and so he felt thin, and there's something about him, he's the loss of something of his substances being there. It's now affected him to the point where he is wholly given over to the ring and cannot succeed in the quest. So evil is won at this point. Now it's funny because we think of evil being manifested in the form of Sauron, which it is, but he is not the essence of evil. If he were the essence of evil, he wouldn't exist at all. He is simply a creature given over to evil, committed to evil, committing to using evil for the sake of power, to dominate. But he himself is still threatened by evil and wants to hold on to everything that's good. That's why he wants dominion over it. He still acknowledges the good by wanting dominion over the things. And if he were truly entirely evil, he wouldn't exist anymore at all. And he wouldn't be threatened here by another wielder of the ring. But he is. So he is a creature in the end, terrified, greater than Frodo, but resistant to the power of the ring. Is Frodo, in a way that the great beings are not. And this is interesting, because in a way, Sauron is no greater than Gandalf. He's the same sort of being. He's one of the Istari, right? He's one of the wise ones, but he's given himself over to folly. Same thing with Saruman. So Gandalf could wield it, but he would be exactly like Sauron. And then he explains, understand, Frodo, I would use this for good, but it would corrupt me. And I wouldn't do the one thing necessary. I would seek to heal the wounds of the earth, and I wouldn't destroy the power of the ring, which is the one thing that's needed. And the only one who will be able to do this is someone who can't think much of himself. From a group of beings who doesn't think much of themselves, because nobody else does either. And this is their great strength, is they are naturally humble. It's not because it's a psychological characteristic, it's because they're actually pathetic. And there's their strength. There's a strength in their weakness, and in their willing to do the act of service for others. And again, Tolkien is obviously making a Christian commentary out of this of some sort. But it's not, again, Frodo is not Christ. And one of the ways we see that is he doesn't actually destroy the power of the ring in the end. He fails in the quest. I remember saying this years ago, and one student was so angry with me about it. You wouldn't have thought so, but he was angry because he saw the Christian architecture of the poem, or of the work, and was upset that I said that he failed in the quest. But he does fail in the quest. He clearly fails in the quest. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't in the end get destroyed. It's just that what destroys evil is evil. The shadow, which is now again our little friend. Why don't we pick this up? Gollum. I'll come back to the text now, because Sam gets knocked down. The Nazgul are coming back from Mount Doom. Sam got up. He was dazed, and blood streaming from his head dripped in his eyes. He groped forward, and then he saw a strange and terrible thing. Gollum on the edge of the abyss was fighting like a mad thing with an unseen foe. To and fro he swayed, now so near the brink that almost he tumbled in, now dragging back, falling to the ground, rising and falling again. Think of when Christ is carrying the cross and he keeps falling down and getting back up and falling down and getting back up. I think it's being echoed here. And all the while he hissed but spoke no words. The fires below awoke in anger, the red light blazed, and all the cavern was filled with the great glare and heat. Suddenly Sam saw Gollum's long hands draw upwards to his mouth. His white fangs gleamed and then snapped as they bit. Frodo gave a cry, and there he was, fallen upon his knees at the chasm's edge. But Gollum, dancing like a mad thing, held aloft the ring, a finger still thrust within its circle. It shone now as if verily it was wrought of living fire. Precious, 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 Gollum cried, my precious, oh, my precious. And with that, even as his eyes were lifted up to gloat on his prize, he stepped too far, toppled, wavered for a moment on the brink, and then with a shriek he fell. Out of the depths came his last wail, precious, and he was gone. There was a roar and a great confusion of noise. Fires leapt up and licked the roof. The throbbing grew to a great tumult, and the mountain shook. Sam ran to Frodo, picked him up, and carried him out the door. And there was there upon the dark threshold of Samouth Naur, high above the plains of Mordor, such wonder and terror came on him that he stood still, forgetting all else, and gazed as one turned to stone. Black rain, storms, whatever, destruction of all things starts falling down. But note that the ring is destroyed by whom? Gollum. But who leads Gollum to do such a crazy thing. I mean, because it's an accident. Like he's standing at the edge, he's looking at this, but remember what had been said to him: if you do this, the ring will avenge itself upon you. Now the ring is going to destroy itself in the process. This is the idea of evil actually being nothing and ultimately consuming itself. When everything good is left, there's nothing left. There's nothing good left in Gollum. He was Smeagol Gollum, now he's only Gollum. Smeagol's gone away. There was a battle of the wills within Smeagol. Gollum, Smeagol was just, because he had, and interestingly, pity stayed Bilbo's hands. He had pity on this creature. And because of his pity, an unintended consequence might ensue because of this. And who knows yet, but this creature, says Gandalf, may actually be part of the wise one's ways of dealing with this problem, right? You were going to
say that actually on the next page. I really like the line where Frodo says, remember Gandalf's words from the very first time they were talking about him?
Yes.
Frodo said, he should have just killed him, Bilbo should have just ended him. And Gandalf said, even Gollum may have something yet to do.
But for him, Sam, I could not have destroyed the ring. Well, he didn't. The quest would have been in vain even at the bitter end, but let us forgive him. For the quest is achieved, and now all is over. I'm glad you are here with me, here at the end of all things, Sam. So it reminds us of what Gandalf had said. So there is a sense of providential ordering here. All the talk about doom, fatalism, there's still a sense that there's an orchestration of the plot here from behind the scenes, to the point where it's a little bit hokey, the ending. Right? It's like, so you get the ring and you're dancing on the edge of the chasm of fire, really, and you lose sense of where you are. But there it is. He's totally consumed with the thought of the ring. He's aware of nothing else. Self-centered. Martin Luther, in his commentary on Romans, talks about sin as being curved upon ourselves. In se curvatus, to be curved in upon ourselves, self-regarding, not regarding any good, just ourselves. That's what Gollum is. Gollum is there. He is totally self-regarding. He looks at the ring, but the ring, again, consumes him. And what does the ring symbolize? Power. But power with no goodness, no beauty, no truth. It's all given over to power. Well, ultimately, it just corrupts absolutely, as Lord Acton says. All power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely. So great teaching here, and but reflecting on the presence of evil consistently portrayed, I think, in Tolkien in the Augustinian fashion as the privation of the good. And if you don't see that, I think you really miss the point, and you're not reading the text very carefully, because it's very careful. What you could tell from the passages I read, how strongly he held to this idea. And also, however, that the ring, which we might call evil, seemed to have a will of its own, but actually its will was connected to its maker. So it was just a technical implement. It seemed to have, but it didn't really. It wasn't a person. It didn't really have a will of its own, but it was somehow connected to his purposes. Sort of like Chat GPT, sort of connected to the purposes of those that make it. Right? It seems like you can use it, and but actually it has a design, and the design is I don't want to get too much into that, but it's set up so it's not just a neutral implement. It serves the purposes of those that made it, and will serve the ends for which they made it, and will deceive you into thinking that you can master it, and ultimately no one can master it except for Sauron. That too Gandalf says. There's no way, this is only an evil thing. Which now then brings us to the question of, is technology neutral? Because I hear from amongst Christians that it is neutral. It's always neutral. It depends on the use. Have you not heard this? So there's no, technology is not evil. It's just a thing. Things are neither good nor evil. It depends on the purpose with which you use them. All of which has a ring of truth to it, but is not entirely true. Because some things are made to be wicked and have to call them totally neutral is to be, I think, misrepresenting the situation. It's to tell part truth, which is a form of a lie. What if the technology is set up so that the purposes of those that designed it is being achieved even while others are using it for their own benefit and don't see the higher purpose for it, for which it was made? And that does seem to characterize a lot of what we see in the modern tech that we use. But I'll say no more about that for now. You can comment if you want. But note that when I said this last time, when Aragorn rides out, why don't I go to that passage, with the council of the fellowship now severed from Frodo and Sam, and they have a debate. 872. This is my text, which is the last debate. And this is in the houses of the healing. And the debate is between Gandalf and others. And they've already defeated the forces of Sauron in the Battle of Pelennor Fields. It's a great victory. Improbable. Comes again with the riders of men coming to the rescue. Extraordinary, fantastic in the film. The light coming on, in various improbable scenes. Just arriving at the moment of clear defeat. It's all over. And then they ride, and you hear the sound of the trumpets and the quailing, which is done well in the films as well, right? It's the fear and the light. And the lights in their eyes, and so that sort of, I think it's extraordinarily well done. But then the comment in the council, "My lords, listen to the words of the steward of Gondor before he died. You may triumph on the fields of the Pelennor for a day, but against the power that has now risen, there is no victory. I do not bid you despair as he did," says Gandalf, "but to ponder the truth in these words. The stones of seeing do not lie, and not even the Lord of Barad-dûr can make them do so. He can, maybe, by his will, choose what things shall be seen by weaker minds, or cause them to mistake the meaning of what they see. Nonetheless, it cannot be doubted that when Denethor saw great forces arrayed against him in Mordor, and still more being gathered, he saw that which truly is. Hardly is our strength suffice to beat off the first great assault, the next will be greater. This war, then, is without final hope, as Denethor perceived. Victory cannot be achieved by arms. Whether you sit here to endure siege after siege, or march out to be overwhelmed beyond the river, you have only a choice of evils. And prudence would counsel you to strengthen such strong places as you have, and there await the onset. For so shall the time before your end be made a little longer. Then you would have us retreat to Minas Tirith, or to Dol Amroth, or to Dun Harrow, and there sit like children on sandcastles when the tide is flowing, said Imrahil. That would be no new counsel, said Gandalf. Have you not done this, and little more, in all the days of Denethor? But no, I said this would be prudent. I do not counsel prudence. I said victory could not be achieved by arms. I still hope for victory, but not by arms. For into the midst of all these policies comes the ring of power, the foundation of Barad-dûr, and the hope of Sauron. Concerning this thing, my lords, you now all know enough for the understanding of our plight and of Sauron's. If he regains it, your valor is vain, and his victory will be swift and complete, so complete that none can foresee the end of which, while all this world lasts. If it is destroyed, then he will fall, and his fall will be so low that none can foresee his arising ever again, for he will lose the best part of the strength that was native to him in his beginning, and all that was made or begun with that power will crumble, and he will be maimed forever, becoming a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, but cannot again grow or take shape. And so a great evil of this world will be removed. Note that he's not gone in that, which is also interesting. You get no sense of that when you watch the film. Oh, that's the end of Sauron. Gone, disappeared. Other evils there are that may come. For Sauron is himself but a servant or emissary. Yet it is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. What weather they shall have is not ours to rule. This is a great motto for life. Can't stop it all. You can do what you do. You've got enough, a little patch. Defend your patch. Right? Now Sauron knows all this, and he knows that this precious thing which he lost has been found again, but he does not know yet where it is, or so we hope, and therefore he is now in great doubt. For if we have found this thing, there are some among us with strength enough to wield it. That too he knows. For do I not guess rightly, Aragorn, that you have shown yourself to him in the stone of Orthanc? I did so, ere I rode from the Hornburg, answered Aragorn. I deemed that the time was ripe, and that the stone had come to me for just such a purpose. Now, interesting like that. Again, it's just accidental, providential, all these things. It just came at the right, and I guessed, or rather I discerned that it was the right time to do these things. Right? Again, there's an element of prudence even in that. It was then 10 days since the ring-bearer went east from Rauros, and the eye of Sauron, I thought, should be drawn out from his own land. Too seldom has he been challenged since he returned to his tower. Though I have foreseen how swift would be his onset and answer, maybe I should have dared to show myself. Bare time was given me to come to your aid. But how is this? Said Eomer. All is vain, you say, if he has the ring. Why should he think it not vain to assail us if we have it? He is not yet sure, said Gandalf. And he has not built up his power by waiting until his enemies are secure, as we have done. Also, he could not learn how to wield the full power all in a day. Indeed, it can be used only by one master alone, not by many. And he will look for a time of strife ere one of the great among us makes himself master and puts down the others. In that time the ring might aid him if he were sudden. He is watching. So what would have happened if one of them actually did take the ring? He would first have to put down everybody else around him. That's what he would do. They wouldn't act in union. There would be no goodness of community. It would be a solitary evil act in which everyone else would be subdued in the process. There would be no democracy. It would be Satan. Right? The other devils would have to swear allegiance to him out of fear. He's watching. He sees much and hears much. His Nazgul are still abroad. They passed over this field ere the sunrise, though few of the weary and sleeping were aware of them. He studies the signs. The sword that robbed him of his treasure remade. The winds of fortune turning in our favor, and the defeat unlooked for of his first assault, the fall of his great captain. His doubt will be growing, even as we speak here. His eye is now straining towards us, blind almost to all else that is moving. So we must keep it. Therein lies our hope. This then is my counsel. We have not the ring in wisdom or great folly. It has been sent away to be destroyed, lest it destroy us. Without it, we cannot by force defeat his force, but we must at all costs keep his eye from his true peril. We cannot achieve victory by arms, but by arms we can give the ring bearer his only chance, frail though it be. And so they're going to give themselves and sacrifice their lives as far as they know. We're going to ride forth, and we are going to meet him, and we can't defeat him. Not possible, but that is what we're going to do. As Aragorn has begun, so we must go on. We must push Sauron to his last throw. We must call out his hidden strength so that he shall empty his land. We must march out to meet him at once. We must make ourselves the bait though his jaws should close on us. He will take the bait in hope and in greed, for he will think that in such rashness he sees the pride of the new ring lord, and he will say, so. He pushes out his neck too soon and too far. Let him come on, and behold, I will have him in a trap from which he cannot escape. There I will crush him, and what he has taken in his insolence shall be mine again forever. So we walk into a trap. So what a great, let's go into a trap that's going to cost us our lives. There's the play. Here's the strategy. And out they go. And so then they do actually go that. They march out in all of their might. And the enemy watches them. He makes no sign. They ride on, and again, the mouthpiece of Sauron comes forward. I won't read that over, although I love it, as it's just terrific stuff. He shows signs, and then they ask, and this is just parley, it's delaying tactics. All of this is delaying tactics. The whole purpose of this is to draw the eye of Sauron. It's to be the bait. Looking in the messenger's eyes, they read his thought. He was to be that lieutenant and gather all that remained of the West under his sway. He would be their tyrant, and they his slaves. But Gandalf said, this is much to demand for the delivery of one servant, that your master should receive in exchange what he must else fight many a war to gain. Or has the field of Gondor destroyed his hope in war, so that he falls to haggling? And if indeed we rated this prisoner so high, what surety have we that Sauron, the base master of treachery, will keep his part? Where is this prisoner? Let him be brought forth and yielded to us, and then we will consider these demands. It seemed then to Gandalf, intent, watching him as a man engaged in fencing with a deadly foe, that for the taking of a breath the messenger was at loss. Yet swiftly he laughed again. Do not bend, ye words, in your insolence with the mouth of Sauron, he cried. Surety you crave? Sauron gives none. If you sue for his clemency, you must first do his bidding. These are his terms. Take them or leave them. These will we take, said Gandalf suddenly. He cast aside his cloak, and a white light shone forth like a sword in that black place. Before his upraised hand, the foul messenger recoiled, and Gandalf, coming, seized and took from him the tokens, coat, cloak, and sword. These we will take. Note the light and darkness again. In memory of our friend. But as for your terms, we reject them utterly. Get you gone, for your embassy is over and death is near to you. We did not come here to waste words entreating with Sauron, faithless and accursed, still less with one of his slaves. Be gone. Then the messenger of Mordor laughed no more. His face was twisted with amazement and anger to the likeness of some wild beast that, as it crouches on its prey, is smitten on the muzzle with a stinging rod. Rage filled him, and his mouth slavered, and shapeless sounds of fury came strangling from his throat. But he looked at the fell faces of the captains and their deadly eyes, and fear overcame his wrath. He gave a great cry. By the way, his wrath is connected to the wreath and writhing. He gave a great cry and turned, leapt upon his steed, and with his company galloped madly back to Cirith Gorgor. But as they went, his soldiers blew their horns and signaled longer range, and even before they came to the gate, Sauron sprang his trap. And they close around them, and the terrific speech that Aragorn gives, riding out in front of the armies and so forth, it's not there. I made it all up. You had to have Gandalf, or I guess Aragorn, say something terrific there. Nothing of the sort. How is it portrayed? Pippin stabbed upwards, and the written blade of Westernesse pierced through the hide and went deep into the vitals of the troll, and his black blood came gushing out. He toppled forward and came crashing down like a falling rock, bearing those beneath him. Blackness and stench and crushing pain came upon Pippin, and his mind fell away into a great darkness. So it ends as I guessed it would, his thought said, even as it fluttered away, and it laughed a little within him ere it fled. Almost gay, it seemed to be casting off at last all doubt and care and fear. And then, even as it winged away into forgetfulness, it heard voices, and they seemed to be crying in some forgotten world far above. The eagles are coming. The eagles are coming. For one moment more, Pippin's thought hovered. Bilbo, it said. But no, that came in his tale long, long ago. This is my tale, and it is ended now. Goodbye. And his thought fled far away, and his eyes saw no more. Then we move on to book 6. Shift the scene. But there's no speech. Aragorn standing in front of the men of the West, stand and fight and all this stuff. Not interested in the fight. They just go out there to distract Sauron. That's it. I mean, it's a great Hollywood moment, just like we have when Frodo is hanging on by his hand, falling into into the cracks of Mount Doom, and Sam pulls him up. It's not there either. It's you got to have a few Hollywood moments, I guess, in there. Not there. Interesting additions. I don't think they really detract from the story theologically, so I don't really object too strongly. But the objection is in the portrait of evil. My sympathies with Peter Jackson. How do you portray that in film? Because you're, portraying something you can't see. Yeah, maybe better in an audiobook. But even that, much better in a written tale. Power of the word. There's something about that. I'm a professor of literature, but I do think literature does things that you can't do with music and you can't do with painting or film. There you go. Any comments or questions about that? It's all over the place. The idea of the shadows and the effect of evil in pulling people into the realm of shadow as well. It's not just a spiritual realm, it's a realm of darkness, shadow, non-being, non-existence, and yet they still have some existence, but it's just a frail and imprisoned existence. They're literally slaves. Okay, well then we'll leave it for now. That's good for today.